Why over 100 people all over the world got my portrait tattooed on them, even though I'm not some kind of model or a celebrity? How did I reach close to 1 million followers across different platforms already years ago? And why exactly did I end up in Austin? What brought me here? Why do I live in Texas, even though I was born in Leningrad, in St. Petersburg, Russia? And basically, it wasn't easy to end up in US. The first thing that people find unusual about my upbringing is that I grew up in the forest, meaning I was living 5 years in a tent, literally. Why I was doing that is my parents did this kind of camping, which we left every summer ever since I was born, ever since I was a baby, to the forest near Finland. And we stayed there for 3 to 4 months out of the year. And it was repeatedly every year happening the same scenario. So it made 5 years in total that I lived in a forest in a tent. As you can imagine, it made me think a lot of the time. It made me very introspective. And it made me also view different systems such as societal norms and schools, education, city life, everything that comes to civilization under a totally different angle, because I grew up amongst the woods and the pine trees and barely any people. It was only nature, no commodities, obviously no internet until I was in high school. So it was a very interesting time that impacted a lot my perception. I think everything that I do in life and everything that led me throughout my choices was breaking down to me studying power and influence. At the end, power, I use it as a psychoanalytical term, meaning the instinct that we are all born with of self-expression and influence on the world and on other people. How do we reach higher expressions of power? That was exactly the question that always interested me. I was expressing curiosity to power topics already as a little child. So at the age of 5, 6, I was sculpting from clay. I did a lot of art already. I was sculpting from clay different body parts. For example, an arm where I would sculpt a hole in the middle, fill it in with red water colored by watercolor. Then I would cover it with a thin layer of skin color, and I would take injections. Then I sculpted a pregnant woman, put a baby inside her belly, then put some red water into it, cover it with a skin layer, and performed C-section on her before I even went to school, which you can tell I didn't have any kindergarten background. I had all the time in the world to play, to do art, and to express myself, to self-discover. My parents were from a pretty poor upbringing, pretty poor family. One of my relatives, she was forcing religion on me since my very early age. So that part of my biography made me very quickly come up with my own opinion on that topic, which already made me question at the age of 6 or about that age, question the existence of God, the question of morality, of religion, and importance of it, to the point that I had a conversation with my father whether I would argue and prove my point, saying that I need to be convinced by something before I believe it. Again, growing up in the forest made me question everything and not believe anything just because it exists, because I could see how absurd all societal norms are when you're coming from the nature. How exactly did my brand appear and what led me to that? I started my career mainly through art, and the nickname is based on the book of psychoanalyst from Austria, Sigmund Freud. One of his books is called Totem und Tabu, German name of the book, and that's what inspired me to use it as a nickname, combining tattooing and taboo topics, showing my high interest to subconsciousness, psychology. I've always had systems thinking in a way, and when I was studying in school, I performed very well, even though I was isolated from society for 3-4 months out of every year. I studied French in school, and before I graduated from school, I already sold myself as a tutor to some children that I met just outside randomly in the street that I saw needed my help. I was curious how to question every system that I encountered. I could see how I can probably teach and explain language rules to kids faster than the school does it. So I was tutoring French and drawing and painting because I was studying those subjects already way before school and during my whole school education as well. So after studying in French gymnasium, I was going to an art school, and I've spent most of my years growing up there. So basically my interest was always how to make better systems. How can I teach language faster? How can I teach art to people who never did it? And as you can see here on this example, I've just finished a class of 1 month oil painting class to a few girls who never painted with oil before, and all it takes for me is just explaining a set of rules, a bunch of rules. I like to explain marketing through psychoanalysis and self-awareness. I like to explain how I do business through influence and power instinct, power integration. I will explain on my blog pages what exactly that means. I like to teach tattooing through classical art, and I was the only one in the world who came up with the method of tattooing a person, having a live person as a reference. So I would take a wife that some husband wanted to get tattooed on him. I would place her in front of me, put the directed light on her to view the face in the best way from artistic standpoint, because your eyes show you so much better all the details and color combination in the photograph. I just said to tattoo world, like, hey, let's challenge this. Why do we all work from pictures? Why not do it from live observation? And it went pretty successful, to the point that after 5 months of tattooing, I was invited to prestigious tattoo studios in St. Petersburg, of the Russian capital of culture. After 1 year of tattooing, I started winning on most conventions where I was invited for tattooing. Then 1.5 years into tattoo industry, I started to be invited working across the world. That's how I discovered Europe, and I moved to Germany at the age of 25, married an Italian-German man, and lived there for a few years until we had an argument and he started threatening me with a divorce. I decided to show my character and go about the situation my own way. I said, hey, let me move to Paris. I've always wanted to study fashion. I'm actually curious about business aspect of fashion industry. I love Paris. I love French language. I'm equipped to live there. I know it better than German language that I studied at the time. I'll just move there, apply into a university, and if you're behaving, if we're on good terms, I can come back once I graduate the university. After studying graphic design in Russia, I moved to Paris to finish fashion design study in fashion marketing, fashion business, fashion drawing, and styling. That lasted for the COVID period. I got to walk around Eiffel Tower having 0 people in my eyesight. It was completely under a curfew, and I was pretending I'm a tourist and I don't really understand what's going on. So I went for a walk, and I ended up near Eiffel Tower because that's where I rented my apartment. Walking, seeing 0 people around, it was so surreal, and Paris influenced me very strongly with its beauty, with its unbelievable atmosphere. And of course, studying fashion business also gave me a lot of food for thought. Then I returned to Germany and I started working on my American visa so that I can move under talent visa and apply for a green card for special achievements in the art industry. It took me several years, but at the end it was approved, and I moved to New York about 5 years ago from when this video is made, and I worked there under a contract as a tattoo artist, and my green card was approved at the condition that doing my life portraits that still nobody can reproduce in the world, doing it in color, I will open an art school in US and start teaching American artists do different approach in art and view things differently. And again, it's my favorite thing, influencing how people think and changing, altering their mindset and pushing their limits. I'm really all about challenge, and another line of my life interest and how it represented was me working at my first official job, or only official job that I ever had, in an adult store in Russia as an 18-year-old girl. I went there not because I didn't have any other choices. I could work basically in many different industries, but I first was curious about sales. Second, I was extremely interested in psychology, because when people come to an adult store to fix and solve some of their issues or to improve how they live and the quality of their lives, they become completely vulnerable, and you don't really find any other industries where people are so open and they talk so bravely to you. They're forced to talk so openly. After staying in the store there for a few months, I decided that studying human behavior there was not my final goal. So I went into studying psychology. I did a decade of psychotherapy on myself. Like, I underwent 10 years of psychotherapy. I took an immense amount of knowledge out of it. I studied hypnotherapy, I studied psychoanalysis, I studied human behavior and non-verbal signals and cues that the body is giving from special agents and how they work with people. I studied micro-expressions of facial features just to understand how to apply it also to art, because I'm very focused on working on portraits when I sculpt or paint or draw or I teach that, or I tattoo a portrait. For me, the emotional expression of the face says so much to me about the person without the person being aware that they give it away to me. Then I proceeded to studying persuasion, studying influence, marketing. I like studying human decision making, and honestly I was struggling in school with understanding other people because I didn't grow up much around other kids. So because it was hard for me to read what others are thinking, I also felt like I really have an urge to understand, because I cannot really feel much of like guessing what exactly people mean, why they cry, what is going on, what are their intentions towards me when they interact with me. As a teenager, I realized I have to learn that, because that skill is kind of lacking, and it was hard for me to connect with people, probably due to too much isolation in the Scandinavian pine trees. So I've dedicated a lot of years and a lot of my free time after my art studies, after all my moving, all my traveling. I dedicated a lot of my lifetime to studying human behavior, human psychology, my own psychology, how to work on my mindset, how to work on other people's mindset. When I moved to New York, I was all by myself, so I had to face a pretty difficult period there, because a lot of political situations also changed in that period of time. My family got some issues, my parents. Shortly before moving, I also found out about my father not being my biological father, which I thought all my life he was. So there was a lot of things combined into one period of time, multiplied by adaptation to the new country, a different continent. I moved completely by myself. In Germany, I used to have my husband. In France, I had just the closeness of my previous place where I could stay. Germany was like 4 hours away by train. I could always take a plane back to Russia during 2 hours. In New York, it started to feel completely different, and the city kind of crushed me. I had a very bad mental breakdown. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Now this time it was confirmed, because doctors had assumptions about it before. I don't know if it determines me, but definitely I did have a mixed episode, so I had to get on 3 types of medications to get out of it, because it was 1 year of my life being kind of on pause in New York while I was going through a very heavy mental crisis. But surprisingly, even though I was always kind of against medication, it did help me a lot, and it made me be back on my track, and that made me decide to change states as soon as I could. So I landed in Austin, where I finally decided that since I'm so isolated now from everyone, not only am I on the foreign continent, which I never visited before moving there, it's a new place. I also moved to a different state, so it's like all over again my 5th move. And I almost know no people in the area, so I kind of felt more allowance to do whatever the hell I want. So I opened my shop, kind of randomly. I didn't really plan for it, but I had to open it because I didn't like any other systems that existed around the city. I started my art school, which I promised in my green card application, and things just started to feel way more aligned, and that's where I've reached my peak in terms of my income, my success, not my following, but still even that. Like, I've always been good with navigating attention and getting attention and knowing what to do with it, how to monetize it, and so on. But this year I'm really getting more into the serious studying of business. I'm attending different seminars in different states from best American speakers that I can find. And that kind of explains me my whole life strategy and all my decisions previously to this year, how they led me to exactly that environment that I always needed to push myself further and to motivate myself. And I think that through studying power and through being all about power, self-expression, freedom, beauty, sexuality, openness, honesty, and such, I finally found my environment, my people, and a lot of appreciation in the industry and outside the industry. And I'm hoping to help so many businesses going further, and of course to grow my own. So, as you can see, Fernando, he was my partner for this video, but it's evening here. We're going to sleep. Thank you for following. Thank you for watching. If you didn't see my pages, you can subscribe by the link in bio. My name is Valentina Ryabova. Let me know in comments, how was this story for you? And was there anything that you'd like to hear more about?